Hello and welcome to this short presentation on the GCSE Power and Conflict Poetry Cluster, and the task and the sort of topic here, how to choose the right poem to compare. This is something that students often are concerned about, but the first thing I would say is choose the most obvious poem to you. You don't get any extra marks for picking something that's seemingly obscure or difficult. The examiner won't be more impressed by it. They just want to see a well-written, well-constructed, well-thought-through essay that gives you the best possible chance to get marks. Their job is to award you as many marks as they can, make it as easy as you can for them to do that. So let's look at the question firstly. This question is taken from the Summer 2019 series. And what that really means is that it's unlikely, not to say it won't, but it's very unlikely to come up again in this particular exam series. Compare how poets present the ways that people are affected by war in War Photographer and in one other poem from Power and Conflict. First off, the ways means methods. And so we need to discuss somewhere in this methods things that the writers do on purpose to convey their meaning. But beyond that, the most important thing to recognise is what the question's actually asking you. How people are affected by war. And so I need to choose the right question. I need to choose one which is about people and how they are affected by war. You might think this is easy, but we do sometimes see some strange choices. So the thing that I'm going to encourage you to do is to use what's provided to you. You've got the copy of the poem here, War Photographer. I think that's reasonably visible if I just scan up a little bit. And you read that, and you make sure that you write about War Photographer in something resembling detail. That makes good sense. It's printed in front of you, no memory required. But you do need memory for the other question. Too often, what we see is students picking a poem that they remember. Whether it's the right poem for the question doesn't seem to pay too much attention. So the question, and I'm just going to write a little reminder to myself. Oh, get that right. Question being, how people, should make it make some sense really, how people are affected by war. I know that this is the one I've got to write about. And I'm just going to quickly go through the poems and explain and pick one. Ozymandias, no, not about war. London, no, it's about a man walking through London. Extract from the Prelude, no, boy rows boat into lake, sees mountain, is in awe. It's not about war. My Last Duchess, it's not about war. Charge of the Light Brigade, right. It is about war, isn't it? Yes. But do we really learn about how people are affected? I think it's a bit of a stretch. We're told that the soldiers die and that we should honour and celebrate them, but I'm not sure there's enough there. Exposure, how people are affected by war, I could use that. I could use it potentially because we can see how the weather affects the men. That works quite nicely. Storm on the Island. Potentially I could use it, but I'd have to work quite hard. I'd firstly need to do a lot of work to establish that the storm is a metaphor for the conflict in Northern Ireland, and there's too much work to be done ultimately to make it make sense. Bayonet charge. That could work because we actually see a soldier in the midst of war charging towards an enemy. So I could go for that. Remains. It's an obvious one, I think. Because we see how the soldier who shoots the looter is affected by the war that he's in. If I'm clever, I can also talk about the internal war, the inner conflict, the guilt that he feels as a consequence of what he's done. So I'm kind of drawn to that one already. Poppies, we see how a mother is affected by war. So that's potentially a good choice. Bayonet charge, Tissue, no, it's a metaphor for, you know, humans, how we're all the same. The emigre, that could work. Again, I might have to work quite hard to explain what the war is exactly, but we can see that the emigre who has emigrated is affected by war because they've had to leave their home. So that works. That could potentially work. Checking out my history. No, it's about history and Eurocentric history and who teaches what. And kamikaze, I think, is another really potentially strong choice. We see how the decision of the kamikaze, of the fighter pilot, how that affects the rest of his life, how it affects the children, and maybe that's a strong choice because it really does tie into the idea of people. It's not just how a person is affected by war, but that's a poem which demonstrates how more than one person is affected, and that need not be a reason to choose it, because now what I've done is I've narrowed it down to 1, 2, 3, 4 poems, and then it comes down to, well, which one probably do you feel that you know the best? As long as we don't do something daft like choose Ozymandias or London, then we're giving ourselves a chance, and then beyond that it's a case of, well, which one are we most personally affected and motivated to write about, because that's what poetry's supposed to do. Which one speaks to us? Which one makes us feel something? And I'll leave that for you to decide. And ultimately, what you have there is a strong task. So there's something that you can be getting on with as part of your revision. Compare how poets present the ways people are affected by war in War Photographer and in one other poem from Power and Conflict. Whether that's Remains, Kamikaze, Exposure, or maybe at a push, The Emigre, we've got ourselves a good poem to write about, and we're giving ourselves the best possible chance to get some good marks. We're also making the job of the examiner that little bit easier.